before they jumped out on the practice field. We'd be happy to have you as a part of the conversation. 615-737-1045 is the number. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. Good morning, bud.
Good morning. Positive day one yesterday for the Titans.
Yes. Did you enjoy? I went back and listened to the podcast because you basically did the second hour of the show. And I wanted to critique and I wanted to kind of understand what conversations you and Will Bowling had while I was scampering off to press conferences. Do you feel I abandoned you?
No. I mean, it was unusually long, the wait for Ryan Tannehill to step up to the podium, but it was his birthday. I don't know what they might have been doing in the locker room.
They're doing a workout. He went in there and lifted after practice. We're just sitting out there after. Yeah.
They weren't eating cake?
No, he said no cake in the weight room.
So do you have a rating out of 10 between what Will Bowling – or on what Will Bowling and I did yesterday, as Will Bowling turns around, puts his hands on his hips, and glares right at you?
It's a very, very, I don't know, it's not an assertive pose that he just took. I'm not quite sure how to describe the pose that he just took. But I would say that you guys did, under the circumstances, I'd give you a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
I would give you a C. I think that's a fair assessment.
Does the fact that today is Will Bowling's birthday boost the score?
Oh, Brett, okay.
Level?
The first test.
Happy birthday
No, not yet, Brett. Damn it.
to him. I don't care. Good luck.
I'm
I
doing
tried
a
to come
thing,
prepared
Brett.
today.
I'm doing a thing. I guess I'd rather you be quick on the trigger than just have us sit in silence again today.
I thought you were testing me to see how quick I could do it, so that's why I just went ahead and pushed the button.
No. Fair enough. So what we know is that if we are in a compromised situation and we need Brett Batchelor to make an executive decision, that he is going to be quick on whatever the button it is. It could be the nuclear codes for all we know. And Brett Batchelor will blow us all to hell in the time it took just because he thinks it's a test. He's fast. Brett Batchelor making it happen back in the studio today. Yeah, no, I thought it was well done by you guys, and you're gonna hear from a variety of different players. Amani Hooker's on the show when practice concludes. We'll keep you updated with what time that might be. They ended up about 45 minutes early yesterday. We had to scramble the jets.
Always fluid.
Yeah, training camp. This is it's situational football. That's what yesterday's broadcast was. It's how you are put in compromised situations and how you learn how to adapt. But yes, transaction made this morning, just bottom of the roster churn at this point, with the Titans adding a wide receiver or making a change at the wide receiver position. That announcement put out by the team this morning as I look for it on social media. Lucas, did you have it in your update?
Yes, that was wide receiver Juwan Green waived. Wide receiver Terry Godwin signed.
Now, Terry Godwin, a good player at Georgia.
Former Georgia Bulldog, yeah, you remember him from that time in the SEC. Spent the last couple of years on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Was on and off the active roster, 3 career receptions in the NFL. Was drafted in the 7th round by the Carolina Panthers, I believe, in 2019.
They've been around for a little while. He hadn't hardly played. So.
No, like I said, 3 catches in his NFL career, 32 yards for the 25-year-old who takes the same number that Juwan Green had, number 80.
So, you know what came to mind when that transaction came down? Because I kind of talked about, I was asked a lot of questions about UDFAs yesterday, about guys who are going to be competing for bottom of the roster spots or 4th or 5th on the depth chart, whatever the case may be. And I didn't want it to come off the wrong way, but basically my assessment was I came out yesterday with the objective of watching Treylon Burks. Like that was going to be my focus since we're out here on the practice field. And I know a little bit of the undrafted guys' backgrounds or some of the fringe roster guys, but for the purposes of the main storyline of like the radio show, Burks was the guy that I wanted to watch today. Jeffrey Simmons is that guy today. We'll play you some audio of Jeff talking about his contract situation or lack thereof later on in the show. But I thought when that transaction was made and Terry Godwin was added to the roster, that's kind of what Josh Malone represents to me in a more evolved form. Somebody who's been in the league for a couple of years. Now, Malone's been around since, 2017?
2016 was his final season at Tennessee.
Yeah.
He was a 4th-round draft pick, in 2017 to the Bengals.
And has had precious little playing time on the field. So in looking at kind of the wide receiver situation as we talk about positions that need depth, positions that we feel good about throughout the course of the training camp practice today, Josh Malone, Des Fitzpatrick, and Racey McMath are all 3 guys who you look at and think they're legitimately competing for probably one spot between the three of them on the roster. Now, whether another one or even both ends up on the practice squad after the fact, they've got a lot of time to figure that out, to go through the next couple of weeks as they, see what the results are on the field, who carries over well from day to day, from week to week, and certainly once the preseason competitions start. But I think Terry Godwin is in another position like Josh Malone, just a guy who's been in the league, who understands how to last long enough, but isn't necessarily what you would call a contributor.
Yeah, didn't have as productive a college career as Malone did. Never had a 1,000-yard season. His best year was 2017.
No, because Vols, he was a fourth-round draft pick, Malone.
Yeah, he was drafted fairly highly, and I think his lack of impact with the Bengals was a little bit surprising to a lot of people. He made the right decision to leave school early. There's no question about that. If he had come back in 2017 to play for that 4-8 Butch Jones team with no direction whatsoever at quarterback, I imagine he would not have gotten drafted in the 2018 NFL draft. So he certainly made the right decision there. He was a good player at Tennessee. It was just 1 year of high-level production and was just never really able to crack the Bengals' active roster on a full-time basis. He made some appearances here and there, but Godwin, it's a similar story where he wasn't nearly as productive in college. His best year, 2017, 639 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he was certainly a role player for them, but has just managed to stick around since 2019, which in and of itself is that the NFL average already, 3 years?
Yeah. No,
So-
he's beat the odds.
Yes.
He is better than average as far as NFL players' careers are concerned. And it brings up a conversation that we're going to have today in 2 parts. What are the deepest parts of this Titans roster? Because it's been so much focus, and understandably so, especially during the offseason. All right, what do they need? Who can they add? What can they get? Who can they continue? What more, right? I think it's natural. I think it's a completely understandable reaction for the Titans to be, or for Titans fans rather, and really any fan base in an NFL offseason, for them to just say, okay, what's the next thing that's going to make my football team better? Who else can we get on top of trading for Robert Woods? Because, at some point, I think just the shine, even if it's going to be one of the most critical parts of the team, the shine starts to fade. Because I don't know about you, but I've been getting peppered about Will Fuller and the Tennessee Titans, or Eric Flowers and the Tennessee Titans.
Emmanuel Sanders still out there.
But just like, I'm watching Mohamed Sanu get a job a couple of days ago. Mohamed Sanu, I think we talked about this on air, he has to be 110 years old.
32.
It's 110 years old as far as I'm concerned.
He's 3 years younger than Emmanuel Sanders. But, that's
Don't
also...
you dare shake your head at me, Kirby.
That's the situation with the Miami Dolphins, too, where, they have a really solid wide receiver core right now. They have a really solid core with, not Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, the other Alabama receiver.
Jalen Waddle, Tyreek
Hill, and Mike Gesicki. So I could see that being a good depth piece and experienced guy for the Dolphins. But the Titans...
Well, they've already had him.
Right, but the Titans don't have that front-end production that the Dolphins feel like they have security in. I feel like if the Titans are going to add a body at wide receiver, you have to be confident that he's going to be able to produce for you, because you're probably going to need him at some point.
No, and in the next segment, I want to kind of call back the question that Mike Vrabel was asked on Tuesday, when training camp officially opened up, on the idea of not relying on talent. I thought that was kind of the best snippet of what Mike had to say. That kind of sets the table for what this approach is going to be, because what you're talking about between the Dolphins and the Titans is 2 different things. Now, in theory, Mike McDaniel, who is thought of as the next big thing, the next Sean McVay, the next gifted offensive play caller, who's going to be able to make more out of what he has than most people would, at some point that's going to come into play as well. But they also have the star power to elevate. It's a similar situation in Philadelphia, where, if Jalen Hurts doesn't succeed this year, then you don't feel that it's not going to work for Jalen Hurts at a higher level at any point in his career. This is as stacked as the Eagles' skill position players have been. It's as stacked as the Dolphins' skill position players have been. When's the last time there's been a relevant Miami Dolphins team in your lifetime? Because I can think of one.
Which one?
The one that made the playoffs. Made the
Tannehill?
playoffs with Tannehill, but he got hurt. So Matt Moore started and got
That's right.
straight up decapitated by the Steelers.
I think the most relevant Miami Dolphins moment of my lifetime was the miracle with Ryan Tannehill. And who was it that scored that touchdown on the last second play with Rob
the return?
Gronkowski?
Yeah, Gronk back in coverage.
Kenyon Drake.
Gronk. Who was it, Brett?
Kenyon Drake.
Kenyon
Kenyon
Drake.
Drake.
That's right. That's right.
Kenyon Drake.
That's the most relevant Miami Dolphins moment of my lifetime.
See, for me, it's Bullygate. It's Jonathan. Was it Jonathan Martin and Richie Incognito?
Yeah, Richie Incognito.
Like it was a national.
Big story.
It was a scandal.
That was like 2012 or something.
A scandal in the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, Incognito had quite a resurgence there too. But you're right about
They
Jalen
just
Hurts.
retired. Congrats to Richie.
The Eagles are removing all excuses around Jalen Hurts, right? If you can't produce with Devontae Smith on one side, A.J. Brown on another side, a very solid offensive line and run game, then you're probably not going to be able to do it, especially a couple years into your NFL career. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out.
615-737-1045. What's the deepest part of the Titans roster right now? We're going to talk about that coming up next, and we'll recall some conversations that we had with Mike Vrabel earlier this week. You'll also hear from Ryan Tannehill on what he's looking for from his new skill position players. We're live out here at St. Thomas Sports Park, Titans training camp, day 2 underway. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Buck, you got music.
Sports Park. But, yeah, in kind of talking about positional depth and where you feel the best on the roster, I think for me, bar none, it's this defensive line group. Can I lump the edge guys in too? I feel like I should be able to do that. Just basically based on the rotation that they have at this point, because we know the primary actors, right? We're going to spend a lot of time talking about Jeff Simmons. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that group together, the four of them, with Danico Autry, with Bud Dupree, how he kind of responds in a season where he is expected to be fully healthy. I'd be curious to. I don't think Bud talked yesterday, but I would like to have the opportunity to kind of catch up with him. Because I think for like Lawan, for Bud Dupree, and to a degree for Robert Woods, it's as much about conditioning coming off of the injury as it is anything else, how those guys kind of respond. But, yeah, I feel great about what they have up front, not just the top-end talent, but what they've added. I think Laurel Murchison is nothing. I don't think he's anything overwhelmingly special, but he just needs to give you, between 5 and 8 snaps a game. Tier Tart in the center of that defense has been a pleasant surprise, certainly as a UDFA coming out of, Florida International? Because I know he was an Alabama commit. There was something that happened, and he ended up at FIU. Or
You're talking about Sadie and Tier Tart?
Yeah, Tier
No,
Tart.
he was a UTC, I believe.
Tier Tart, I've got the roster in front of me. Tier Tart was Florida International.
Oh, he was Florida, so I'm thinking of Corey Levin.
Nailed it.
at
Yeah,
UTC.
no. Corey Levin is your resident Chattanooga mock out here, competing for offensive line depth. But in addition to what they already had on the roster, Naquan Jones is a UDFA last year. You talk about undrafted guys that gave them consequential snaps. You saw legit development from a guy like Naquan Jones in a role spot. And I think that's exactly the kind of depth that they're looking for. You just want to be able to have consistency coming off the line. And between that and DeMarcus Walker, who was a second-round pick coming in from Florida State, has bounced around a little bit in the league, but still he's been a productive role player. That's all they need right now. I'm looking for the ability to continuously affect the quarterback, not a substantial drop-off when your top-end guys come off the field, not a Clowney situation where everything went to hell when you didn't have anything beyond Clowney and Jeff.
So is that group, defensive line and edge rushers, lumping them in together, is that the only group on this roster where you feel like you know what you have from top to bottom? Like if you're projecting a 53-man roster and you're looking at Simmons and Danico Autry and Tier Tart and Laurel Murchison, a former fourth-round pick, and Naquan Jones, and then obviously we know who the edge rushers are, and you throw in Rashad Weaver, who basically is like going into his rookie year after getting hurt in the preseason last year and flashing in that Falcons preseason game. You feel like you know what you have at every spot there, and it's a good problem to have when the lower-level guys in the rotation, like Naquan Jones and Laurel Murchison, are fighting off UDFAs instead of needing UDFAs to step up, needing someone to step up.
That's the spot you want to be in.
Which is what happened last year.
That's exactly right. I think, the secondary, you feel like you know what you have because you know what Christian Fulton is. That's your top corner. You know what Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker are. But from top to bottom, and I think Chris Jackson has enough of a body of work for you to feel confident. Josh Kalu is a known commodity. He's been here before. This is somebody who and is famously one of the best moments of their 2019 season with that blocked field goal kick.
But you don't know what you're going to get out of Caleb Farley.
I don't. And I think, that, coming back to where the depth is strongest, I do think that their depth is tangible, even with it obviously takes a hit when Buster Screen retires because at least it's a body that knows how to play, knows the system, and has seen a lot of different NFL offenses. So he at least knows how to get himself in the right position if it's not like overwhelmingly athletic or whatever the case may be. But I feel like outside of Caleb Farley, I'm comfortable with the secondary, but I think that's by extension of how confident I am in what they have to be able to get pressure on the quarterback because you have vastly more margin for error when you got people that can get the quarterback.
But the cornerback spot took a big hit, as we talked about yesterday with Buster Screen and Mike Vrabel saying they need to add a body to replace the retired Screen. So if you're compartmentalizing the defensive back group, you certainly feel better about the safety spot, right? Especially if Theo Jackson can turn into that multiple
Theo Jackson
player that he was at Tennessee.
And that's something to keep an eye on because that's, the loss of Dane Cruikshank and in their three safety looks particularly and how much Cruikshank could give them last season, talking about the tight ends, when you get to a situation like Theo Jackson and where you would envision a role ideally for him, I think that Cruikshank, had he maintained any kind of health, like he was a solid special teams player, but he kept getting derailed consistently, it felt like, because of injury. And then when they found the spot for him, by the way,
guess what happened yesterday?
By the way, Lucas has just pointed out to me that Dane Cruikshank is on some kind of injury list.
Non-football injury list.
With the Chicago Bears already?
Along with Tajay Sharp. With
being
the Chicago
being
Bears.
handed notes secretly under the table. Shady stuff. And you know what? The note I was just handed is correct. 615-737-1045. I just got handed the thing that nobody who cares about Cruikshank. Nobody. It's training camp. I'm talking about depth charts, for God's sakes. But this is the kind of stuff that matters. This is the kind of stuff that they're trying to figure out. Why shouldn't it matter to people who care about roster construction, how your football team gets to the final product,
audio as well,
which is exactly what you're looking for. Now, you bring up Caleb Farley, Lucas. Mike Vrabel talked about that. Brett, was this yesterday or was this Tuesday when training camp officially opened?
Would have been yesterday.
I believe it was yesterday.
All right, let's roll the dice and find out.
I think he can. Again, this is a certain set of circumstances of coming in, not having had a whole lot of conditioning or strength training or football for that matter, and the off season was an opportunity for him to do that, really train hard, lift, add strength and size that's critical in this league, but also an understanding of what his job is and what the offense is doing and formations that they're in or splits that they're in.
5 seconds.
Now trying to add that to practice to where you're able to recognize those things on the field and not on the film. The film's a little slower than the field.
And that's basically the kind of classwork that Caleb Farley and all of the defensive secondary players. I mean, it's a really, really young group beyond. I mean, even Amani Hooker may have just had a birthday recently or is getting ready to have a birthday that would make him 24 years old. But when I'm looking at the situation for Caleb Farley, I mean, their secondary, it was better by leaps and bounds just because of how much better their defensive front was. And then, of course, they've got talent, like you've got talented players. I think from a depth standpoint, you felt as good. Injuries started to kind of shake things up, and then all of a sudden, who was it, Brian Body Calhoun is out there?
Brian Body Calhoun.
Playing substantial snaps. Yeah, that was a thing for a hot second. And looking to see how much Kevin Byard was helped by just how much the younger players more understood their roles, because it allowed Byard to have to kind of make up for more, right? He was covering a lot of different ground because you would have guys out of assignment in 2020, you would have guys out of position, you would have guys who came in off the streets, and all of a sudden, Kevin Byard looks like he's having a substantially worse year because he's out of position, and he's having to make up for a lot of these different guys. The secondary, and that kind of comes back to the conversation we were having earlier about like Miami skill position players, Philadelphia skill position players, how those two teams have constructed their rosters in the offseason, and what you're kind of looking for here. In the same way that I feel about Miami and Philly with the skill players, I kind of feel that about the Titans on defense. Like when you're talking about the overwhelming talent that you have on one side of the ball or the other, and every roster has some kind of deficiency, some kind of flaw. Like you're not going to have the best of everything, except if you're Tom Brady and you're figuring out how to pay all these great players under the table in a thing that should have gotten him Executive of the Year. But I feel that way about the Titans and what they have the ability to do that they can maximize additionally through coaching. And that was kind of the thing, at least on the offensive side of the football, that was the kind of thing that Mike Vrabel was talking about, that they're going to rely more on what their plan is, what they teach, what their disciplines are, what the hallmarks that they have to kind of lean back on in moments where on the football field stuff starts to get crazy. Stuff's flying around at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and all of a sudden the plan that you spent 150 hours putting in work on throughout the course of a week, it goes to hell because Trevor Lawrence can move out of the pocket and he's a giant. He's an avatar running out there. So I think Mike Vrabel talking about the discipline element of it yesterday and not relying on talent, or rather on Tuesday, was a thing that is applicable to this particular team.
Well, I don't want to rely on talent. I don't want to be a coach that relies on talent. I want to coach fundamentals, technique. I want to teach. I want to make sure that they play with great effort, and I know that we're talented. So my job is to not try to rely on talent. I want to try.
About a minute left. I'll turn your mic off.
You know, there's a certain way that we want to play the game, and when we do, you know, we're a good football team. And when we turn it over, and we don't protect the guy with the football, whether that's a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, you know, we're not very good. You know, we can't operate like that.
That win big generally have a degree of superstar talent, no?
You know, I don't know if anybody right now. You know, we haven't played any games, so
10 seconds.
it's for this year. Every year is a new year. You know, we're going to expect your best players have to play.
Coming back.
If that's what you mean.
So that's Mike Vrabel on Tuesday talking about not necessarily wanting to rely solely on the talent of players. I think, you know, to tell Mike, all right, go out there with a less detailed plan and just hope that you have better players. That doesn't exactly sound like a structured organization.
So when talking about depth, you focus mostly on the defensive side of the ball, which is fair, but what about the tight end position? Like, where do we stand on that, on how confident the Titans should feel in their depth?
Better
Because
by a mile.
remember Briley Moore? Remember that guy
I'm looking at him.
who flashed last year in
Looking
training
at him
camp?
right now. I think he's 82 now instead of 49 or whatever the hell.
Out
it
of
was.
Kansas State, undrafted free agent, and he really popped at training camp last year. He gets hurt, goes down, isn't able to factor in, and the Titans were critically thin at that position last year. Well, you come in now with Austin Hooper, who Tannehill kind of got a head start with throughout spring workouts. Chigakonkwo, they love the specimen that he can be, the rookie from Maryland.
Right.
And then throw in the UDFA Briley Moore and Jeff Swaim, who obviously his strengths lie more as a blocker. It's like they have a piece of everything they want as far as traits in that tight end room, and you feel good about them maybe bringing 4 bodies onto the 53-man roster if Moore can sort of pick up where he left off last year.
Well, I don't know how much of that was we looked around at what they had at tight end and it was like, okay, they need that guy to make it. Like they needed Briley Moore last year. This year it feels less essential, less critical. Now he's the kind of player, because we felt that kind of way about Tommy Hudson a couple of years ago. Like he was somebody who you felt, okay, has some kind of a role, or if he needs to be called up from the practice squad or in a certain situation, like he can get you through a couple of snaps if you have a missing body going into the week 4 against whomever the opponent is at this point. Like that's the kind of stuff that you're looking at, those bottom of the roster guys and the developmental people who stuck around and who came back as a part of this offseason. Briley Moore, I think, absolutely in a bigger bodied Ferkser role makes sense. I remember watching a little bit of him at K-State when he was initially on the roster before the injury ended up knocking him out. Unfortunately, I think it was like the first or second day at training camp. It was pretty early on. But for Briley Moore, yeah, that's exactly you find somebody to push Jeff Swaim. Like find somebody to push Jeff Swaim, who was your tight end one definitively last year. And Jeff Swaim spent a lot of time having to help block. The running backs had to help block a lot. This is something that we talked with Greg Cosell about yesterday on the podcast. I regret not having one of those clips today, but you can go check it out in your favorite podcast app. We talked about their how much worse they were and how much worse they were in third down passing situations, and how often they were in 3rd and 6 plus because they didn't have anything in the early downs. They're not doing what the majority of the league does, which is pass on the easiest down, first down, and then set yourself up for second and manageable. Now they're running on first down, they're running on second and long, and then they're in 3rd and 6 plus, and they have to keep extra people in the block because you don't feel great about Taylor Lewan's knee, or David Quessenberry's not ideal on the right side. You've got to have a tight end or a running back to chip, and then you're only sending out 3 receivers. Defense immediate advantage.
With the UDFAs, last year you had guys stepping up, like we've already talked about with Briley Moore and Naquan Jones. Was T.R. Tarter rookie last year,
No.
or that was his second year?
That was second year.
But this time around, who's the name at the top of the list that people are sort of keeping an eye on in training camp? Because I don't know that there are any. I mean, maybe somebody will create that narrative, and I guess
No, I mean, Reggie Robertson is somebody who I think a lot of Titans fans gravitated towards, and he was the UDFA that I noticed most when I saw that they picked him up after the draft. Like he was the most recognizable name on that list to me. He was a productive college player at SMU. I can't admit to watching a ton of their games, but he had been a solid college player and somebody who could come in and provide a camp body. And if he pushes somebody at the back end of the roster, then cherry. You feel good about that because look at the guys, and we're just looking at. We can't tell you what's happening in front of us at this particular moment, but the wide receivers. What I can tell you is the wide receivers, tight ends are directly in front of Lucas and I. Now look at this group: Mason Kinsey, who stuck around year 3. You're talking about Cody Hollister, who has been here for a couple of years. Westbrook Akina, who's an undrafted guy going into year 4. Malone, who's bounced around. Like all of those spots are susceptible, right?
Yeah.
None of those guys are solidified, and yet a couple of those names have lasted several years in the league because they understand it. They understand exactly what they have to do, or they had good coaching on the front end, or whatever the thing that was that clicked for Hollister and Kinsey and whomever else who's found a way to kind of latch on, even if it's just as a camp player, because that gives them the best opportunity to secure a job, if not on the 53, on the practice squad, because it's as much about that for those guys as it is, who you're rolling out 46 men on game day.
This team has a lot of those, right? Like those lower level depth guys. They have a lot of continuity with the lower level depth guys in training camp. Like Logan Woodside comes to mind. You mentioned Mason Kinsey and Cody Hollister. I mean, when you look at special teams, Corey Levin on the offensive line comes back. They love familiar faces around here.
No, I think that, but that's any football team. Look at the Falcons. The Falcons.
Well, yeah.
The Falcons, it's half the Titans roster at some point within the last 5 years of Titans football. The Bears, like coaches gravitate towards players they know. Wasn't that one of the biggest questions around John Robinson? No, he's just bringing his boys from New England. Look at it, he's just doing he's paying the Patriots cast-offs. That was a narrative for a hot second. Malcolm Butler, Matt Castle,
Deion Lewis,
Josh Klein. Like you went down the list. And it was all the guys that Bill Belichick didn't want to keep, and all of a sudden they're getting decent contracts in Tennessee. That's a perpetual part of the league. It's about familiarity, and it's about guys you can trust. Tannehill talking about that yesterday with Treylon Burks. Yeah, I like having him out here, and I like having him making the big plays because that's how I know and I can learn to build that trust in. If I go his direction, if I throw it up to this Clydesdale of a receiver, I know he's going to come down with it. Now, I mean, yesterday he had one particular diving catch that made me kind of cringe a little bit because it's training camp day 1 and stay the hell off the ground.
Yeah, I saw Mike Felder reacting to that on social media too. Like, okay, good, now he can stop diving. Now that he showed he can do that and that he's okay and he's fit. Okay, no more diving in training camp.
Cut it out.
But what would we be saying if Treylon Burks doesn't lay out for that ball, right? If it's there and you feel like it's within his catch radius and he just kind of hits on the brakes a little bit. I don't know. I feel like Treylon Burks had a little more to prove than usual yesterday. If that same deep ball happens today, then maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe someone's in his ear telling him not to do that.
Well,
I feel like that did a lot for him because what was circulating on social media yesterday from the Titans account, from the biggest takeaway of day 1 of Titans training camp, it was that play.
It's such trash that they get to put. I mean, I know it's their team and their practice field and their and their football operations and all these things, but it's trash that they can put that highlight out and the rest of us can't. I want the 7-on-7s. I want the team drills because that's what people in the audience want. That's what the listeners want. That's what people who are obsessing over or complaining, bitching at us because it's the same Kyle Phillips ladder drill for basically 9 months because that's the only thing the media gets to shoot.
Yeah, taking everything in me not to post this ladder drill. Got to post this ladder drill.
So let's hear from Ryan Tannehill about the wide receivers. And I asked him a question yesterday at the press conference. How critical is this time, especially since it's basically rollover from the end of the offseason? This is still phase 3 as long as they don't have pads on, which they will not until August the 1st. I asked Ryan Tannehill, what are you kind of looking for and how critical is it for you to see how much these guys carried over from the offseason?
Yeah, it's huge. I thought we got a lot of really good work done in the spring. Didn't have a lot of full-speed team reps, or if any, but we got a lot of really good work on the details and in timing as far as the pass game goes. So whether it was was individual or group or 7-on-7, we made some big strides.
10 seconds.
Felt like, through our meetings, the past couple days that our guys have retained that
Coming back.
coaching points and were able to kind of pick up where we left off.
That's Ryan Tannehill, Titans quarterback, talking about the process that he goes through in working with a new group of wide receivers at some point each and every training camp. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. David, is it Schiele or Schiele, Lucas?
David Shealy,
David Shealy.
formerly of WBIR in Knoxville.
He's now covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Do you know who plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now, Lucas?
Tom Brady.
Yes. Again, after retiring for 40 days. That's a completely fair assessment.
And Julio Jones.
And Julio Jones, who spoke to the media yesterday. And he gave a quote, I'm telling you, when I laughed out loud, I laughed out loud. You'll hear from former Titans wide receiver Julio Jones coming up next.
But QC Kinetics in 8.
Brett,
Every
you record it?
preseason, regular season, and postseason
Yeah, I am.
Thank you.
radio flagship is 104.5 The Zone.
QC Kinetics is the place that you need to go if you are somebody who is dealing with nagging joint pain or nagging injuries or issues with arthritis. They have you covered. Not pain meds, not with steroids, and not with surgery. QC Kinetics has a better way here in Middle Tennessee from their local medical professionals. They're the nation's leader in regenerative medicine, an advanced, exciting, and natural alternative that can give you lasting relief using your body's own healing power. Steroid shots are toxic to your joints. Pain meds are addictive, and nobody wants to go under the knife. It's 2022, and those old ways are out. The new ways at QC Kinetics are here to stay. Regenerative medicine can restore and repair damaged joint tissue using the natural biologics in your body. No drugs, no downtime, no surgery. QC Kinetics regenerative protocols can address any pain in any joint and give you quality of life that you deserve. So call the local medical professionals at QC Kinetics, 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024.
Hi, this is
2.5 minutes.
2.5.
New Balance Nashville.
Are you
store.
sure? Back live from Titans training camp. Buck Rising here with you until 1 o'clock. David Shealy on the line with us now, somebody who Vols fans know. Isn't that right, Lucas?
That's right. Former teammate of our friend, Madison Blevins.
And covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers presently. David, what's going on, man?
What's going on? What's going on? All right, there's a couple things here.
No, wait. Now, are you about to deliver a message from Madison Blevins that I don't want to hear?
Well, see, now 3 things, because y'all know Madison got married, man. It's Madison Hawk now. Y'all got to get it right.
She did change her Twitter.
I
She
know.
did change her Twitter name.
I almost passed out from exhaustion because I had to fly to New England at 2 a.m. in the morning to make a Titans-Patriots game because Madison got married on a Saturday night in the middle of football season. I could have fought her.
On Vanderbilt game day.
On Vandy, Tennessee game day. I could have killed her.
And because Madison did that, I had to work all these extra hours because she want to go get married and whatnot.
All right, see, I like David. That's it. This is excellent. We can unite in the grievances and slights. All right. So what are your list of 3 things? What do you got?
So first thing was Madison's last name is Hawk. I want to make sure I get that right because her husband Colton helped me move down here to Tampa, so I got to give them a shout out. Secondly, last name is Schiele. It's German. It's hard to say. I get that. So I'm not upset. Every substitute teacher I've ever had didn't get it right.
No, but it's important to correct it on the front end. A lot of people won't do that, and David, I respect you for it because now I'll remember it.
And the last thing is, I know you didn't call me no Vol fan because that is not true. The last thing you're going to ever hear me sing is Rocky Top.
I said that Vols fans know who he is. I didn't accuse you of anything.
Right.
That's fair.
Right, we good.
He's covering the Bucs now. He's down in Tampa Bay working for WTSP at Deacon_Shealy is where you follow him on the social. So Julio Jones spoke to Tampa Bay media yesterday. David, what was that experience like for you?
So I'm from Atlanta. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the basis of all of this. Julio in Tampa Bay is about the weirdest football experience I'm having right now. Because if you would have told me that Julio Jones is going to be in Tampa Bay catching passes from Tom Brady, if you told me that in 2015, I would have told you to turn the PlayStation off because that doesn't seem real. But what I'm getting here is that Tampa Bay is serious about winning a championship. Julio Jones is serious about winning a championship. But remember, Kyle Rudolph was signed just a couple of days before that. So you look at some of these older guys that, let's be real, Tom Brady has just this ability to bring the best out of a receiver no matter the point in their career. And I look at opposing defenses and say, how do you pick your poison with this? It just sounds like a daunting task.
David, it is a complete and it is a completely accurate assessment that you have just had. But I will tell you, those words are the exact same kind of words that came out of my mouth when they traded for him here last June. And then it wasn't a complete and utter disaster, but they needed him in ways that he could not provide. I think the difference, though, as you just pointed out, guys like Kyle Rudolph, and Brady's been doing this since he's been in Tampa, bringing in vets at the end of their career who he knows he can maximize, which is a great point by you. Not everybody has that at quarterback, but they needed Julio Jones to play in Tennessee, and he could not deliver on that. I think the difference being in Tampa is they already have the wide receivers that allow Julio to assume more of a role player situation.
And that is the point that I was going to make, because Julio does not have to come to Tampa Bay to be the 1 nor the 2. Mike Evans is already here. Chris Godwin is on his way back. He did not practice today, but we know that at some point this season he's going to return. But then you have the tight end situation. Gronk is gone, but they bring in Kyle Rudolph. They still have Cameron Brate. There are so many options that Julio doesn't have to take the field and need to be on the field for 40 snaps a game. He could literally just be a guy that comes on the field when Tampa Bay gets in the red zone and be a red zone threat. And that would be perfectly fine with Julio because he'd be on a team where he's utilized. He's obviously somebody of value. And at the end of the day, he's going to be winning football games.
David Shealy is here with us on 104.5 The Zone WTSP covering Tampa sports. I think the availability, though, is still the biggest question, David, because his tenure here I mean, you will see this when he practices. Has he practiced yet in front of Tampa media?
Julio, yes. Julio's first practice was today.
And he looked great, right? He looked like Julio Jones, yes?
He looked like the Julio Jones that I grew up cheering for in Atlanta, and he looked like the Julio Jones that you usually get in training camp. I'm going to be real.
No, training camp, straight up. That I think is the critical point in all of this, is that at week 4, I need to know if the way that he moves is sustainable, because that's the thing. He looks exactly like, as explosive, as sudden, all the movements at that size that make him such a phenomenon. And then he's working with 34-year-old hamstrings as opposed to 26, and it does not seem like it can last.
Yeah, and that is a concern that I do have. You know, a lot of the comments I've heard from Buccaneers fans is, well, how many weeks will Julio be part of this lineup? Can we get to week 6 and he's still there? Will he be able to even be on the roster, be on the active roster in the middle of the season? That is something that we don't know. But I will say, if he's there, it's great. If he's not, I'm not going to be too upset about it, just because it's he's in a depth role. Like he's in a role where he doesn't have to come in and try to make up all of the receptions, the 55 receptions Gronk had last season. He gets to come in and just play a simple role, and that's it. Like I think it's a great situation for him. There were other teams he considered going to. He thought about going to New Orleans, thought about maybe Green Bay. He even thought about going to Cincinnati. But you just look at the way Tampa uses its talent. I think this is the perfect situation for him. It's just, what could Julio provide and for how long is the question, that is the concern, and that's a valid concern. I validate everyone's question about how long Julio can last this season.
It's a trigger warning for Titans fans, because it's like Randy Moss. Randy Moss was trash here, and then he went to a Super Bowl with the Niners. Like, he wasn't Randy Moss, obviously, but he was fine. Like, he could get out there, play some snaps, give them what they needed in spurts, and they ended up making the Super Bowl that season with Colin Kaepernick at quarterback. David Shealy at Deacon_Shealy is where you can follow him on the socials for all of the coverage of Tampa sports, Buccaneers, and everything in between. Thank you, boss. I appreciate you stopping by.
I appreciate you guys, man. It was a pleasure.
All right, that's David Shealy there with us on 104.5 The Zone. 615-737-1045. So we are watching practice. Practice is getting ready to wrap up, or at least we think that it's getting ready to wrap
Allegedly.
up. 11 o'clock is when things are expected to kind of settle in here. Ramon Foster is out here for the first time at training camp while not being an active NFL player. And this is surprising to me. Ramon, can I bother you for 5 seconds on a microphone, please, and thank you? Because this has to be a I don't even know, an eerie experience? Not necessarily the right word.
Let's just call it different.
Hi, Bud.
What's going on, Bud? We didn't even say our core.
No, we had our pleasant.
We did have our pleasantries, man. This is different for me. This is like my last few years in the league. Anyway, I'm on the sideline holding a piece of paper like it's the call sheet. That's basically what my last few years was. Every few days, it's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, just enjoy watching other people work.
So what are you noticing? Because you've been in another NFL training camp. Many people have not. What are you observing difference-wise? Now, we can't talk, by the way, about what we are physically seeing until 11 o'clock. Them's the rules. But, like, just from, like, an environment, ambiance standpoint, what are the differences that you notice out here?
Really not a whole lot of differences, man. I'll say this. You can tell it is a young man's game because these young fellas are just moving around fast, quickly. There's, like, a lot that's going on.
Well, you see what's running behind him.
Well, yeah, 100%. You better get out of the way. I'll say this. I saw him, 22, down on the other side of the field, and I was just like, that's a big human being.
It's a large one.
And I've seen running backs like this before, but, like, you know it's height, but you see them from the side, and this is a whole lot of just me talking about the physique of players.
No, but
He is exactly who you thought he was. If you've never seen him before in person, man, and this is one of my first occurrences of seeing him. Yep, a little bit of little hand.
I didn't see nothing. Hear no evil, see no evil.
Little shoving. But the one thing that I appreciate, though, and I heard it, and we've all heard it, and we've talked about it time and time again, too, is 75. He looks like he did the work.
My guy looks like he's built for the NFL.
Dylan Radins.
Yes, Dylan Radins, man. He looked like –
I was over there watching offensive line individual drills, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
And he seems to have embraced it. He seems to have fully leaned into the offseason conditioning program,
Yep.
and his coaches seem to appreciate it. That was a name that Mike Vrabel brought up.
Dog.
For off-season awards.
Yeah.
Did you guys do off-season awards in
Absolutely
Pittsburgh?
not. It was confusing to me when I saw him